as we have it today, and one of the most popular songs of the Carnatic repertoire. Watch out for the free-flowing improvisation that happens once we play the song itself. Check. We next present Atilana in the raga Madhuvanti. This is a very rhythmically intricate composition of famed violin maestro and my guru, Padma Bhushan Shri Lalgudi Ji Jayaraman. Tilana in the raga Madhuvanti, set to Aditalam in 8-beat cycle. I understand my hand mic is not mic'd enough. I'll repeat that again. We next present Atilana, a very rhythmically intricate composition in the raga Madhuvanti. This is a composition of the famed violin maestro and my guru, Padma Bhushan Shri Lalgudi Ji Jayaraman. Tilana in the raga Madhuvanti, set to Aditalam in 8 beats cycle. Watch out for the wonderful vocal percussion that's going to flag off the composition.
Check. Tak 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 Thank you, Blue Trio. That was wonderful and set the mood for this evening. Let's give them another big hand, please. Before we start, may I remind you to please put your mobile devices in a silent mode or switch them off altogether for the duration of this evening's program. Thank you so much. I would now like to request Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan to accompany our chief guest, Professor Brian Schmidt, to the stage. On behalf of all of us here at the Infosys Science Foundation, our very warm wishes to each and every one of you at the start of this new year, and welcome to this evening's presentation. My name is Deepak Padaki, and I am very, very honored to be your host tonight. This evening is truly special because we are celebrating the 15th anniversary of the Infosys Prize. 15 years of encouraging fundamental research in India, of recognizing extraordinary scientists and social science researchers, many of whom have gone on to make an impact on an even bigger canvas. 2023 was a year that raised a lot of questions about the human spirit and perhaps humanity itself. From debates about protecting our planet, from the negative impacts of climate change, to protecting our bodies from harmful viruses, to protecting societies, and in a sense to reflect upon how we all got to this point. Last evening, we hosted the third Infosys Prize Symposium with each of our Infosys Prize 2023 laureates talking about their research in an intimate gathering, and their work is truly inspiring and so relevant to the times that we are in. I am eager, and I'm sure all of you are, to recognize these inspiring researchers this evening. To start things off, and for his opening address, I invite the President of the Infosys Science Foundation, Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, for his opening address.
Thank you, Deepak. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 15th Infosys Prize ceremony. It's the usual practice at the beginning of a new year to take stock of the year gone by. And what a year this has been. 2023 was a tumultuous year that also saw several landmark moments in science and technology. This was the year that India became the first country to land on the dark side of the moon. Chandrayaan-3 helped detect sulfur on the lunar surface, providing valuable insights into the geological evolution of the moon. The country also saw the launch of its first solar mission, Aditya L1, which has entered the halo orbit of the sun a few days ago. India's space mission also came at a much lower cost than other space missions, setting an example for space missions among emerging economies. This was also the year when AI went mainstream. AI was democratized, and access to sophisticated AI was available to ordinary individuals. With this, we saw explosive growth of generative AI. While generative AI is beginning to disrupt businesses everywhere, it is helping innovation in our research also. The use of AI in data analysis and pattern recognition is leading to tidal changes in how research is being conducted in fields as varied as climate science, genomics, life cycle of medicines and chemical products, and even in social sciences. As algorithms become better trained and AI matures, we can foresee a future in which AI-enabled technologies will be able to provide more precise diagnosis and cost-effective and targeted treatments. AI and ML could help design novel pharmaceuticals and help identify their efficacy before actual production. In agriculture, we can see a future in which AI-based technologies can help map fertilizer needs, real-time monitoring of crops, and processing. This could have huge implications for ensuring food security for billions around the world. While we cultivate a vision for the human race, we must continue to tackle immediate crises that are at our doorsteps. 2023 was the hottest year on record. The climate emergency continues to make its effects known. As the year ended, there came hopeful news about approval of CRISPR gene editing tool for the treatment of sickle cell anemia and beta thalassemia. Time and again, we have seen that science and scholarship are what will provide solutions to some of our most pressing problems. Research is what will help us to better understand our society and its needs. How do we encourage better research across all disciplines? Recognition of scientists and steady funding are two things that will transform India's research environment. We must begin by recognizing those who are doing cutting-edge work in their fields. In the last 15 years, since its inception, Infosys Science Foundation has recognized 92 researchers doing brilliant work in established as well as emerging fields, the so-called white spaces of research. Our mission is to ensure that our scientists and scholars become icons and heroes for current and future generations. The prize has also highlighted interdisciplinary work that's happening across India and the world. The Infosys Science Foundation has its stated goal, the cultivation of a scientific temper among the general public, in addition to encouraging a love of evidence-based science and critical thinking. Respect for reason, logic, and a never-ending curiosity about the world is the legacy that the Infosys Science Foundation wishes to nurture. We have in accordance organized and conducted several public events and lectures at our facilities in Bangalore and in other facilities outside Bangalore. These have brought together people of different schools of thought, backgrounds, and facilitated healthy discussions. Funding for research is crucially important, especially when it comes to translating research into products and inventions that are practical applications on the ground. India has been taking the right steps with funding research. The National Research Foundation, with a proposed budget of 50,000 crores over 5 years, is a step in this direction. Ambitious programs like Chandrayaan-3 and mission-oriented programs such as the National Quantum Mission fulfill both strategic and economic goals. More such programs are needed for India to begin fulfill its full potential. However, India currently invests only about 0.7% of its GDP on R&D. Increasing this to 3% will yield rich dividends. Investments such as this will have to be made both by public and private entities. In order to incentivize this, we must as a society begin by adopting the mindset of thinking science as a public good. In addition to these incentives, we must also ensure that research scholars at both PhD and postdoctoral level are well funded and that faculty at our research institutions are well compensated. This will work as an encouragement for young scholars to pursue research careers. We at the Infosys Science Foundation have been and will continue to support those who are seeking to explore the very frontiers of science. We are shining a light on those who are using their ingenuity and creativity to change the way we think about our world, those who are asking questions about how we got here and where we are going. It remains our obligation to encourage them and assist them in their endeavors. Let me close by congratulating all this year's winners. And of course, you're going to see them up here on the stage following this. Thank you all very much, and again, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Our first laureate this evening in the field of engineering and computer science is currently a professor at the Department of Civil Engineering and Sustainable Energy Engineering at IIT Kanpur. As we all battle the increasing problem of polluted cities, his work seeks answers to the deeper questions of how polluting particles spread in the first place. The jury chair for this category is the Johnson Professor of Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT, Professor Arvind. Professor Arvind was unfortunately unable to join us in person this evening, and filling in for him and to announce the Infosys Prize in Engineering and Computer Science, it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Ashutosh Sharma, a member of the jury for 2023. Professor Sharma is Institute Chair Professor at the Department of Chemical Engineering, IIT Kanpur. He is also elected President of the Indian National Science Academy and Chair of Life Sciences Research Board of DRDO. He was Secretary to the Government of India, heading the Department of Science and Technology between 2015 and 2021. And he was the winner of the inaugural Infosys Prize in this very category. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ashutosh Sharma.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to announce that the Infosys Prize 2023 for Engineering and Computer Science is awarded to Professor Sachidanand Tripathi for the deployment of large-scale sensor-based air quality network and mobile lab for hyper-local measurements of pollution, data generation and analysis using artificial intelligence and machine learning for effective air quality management and citizens' awareness, and for the discovery of new pathways of aerosol formation and growth that provide mechanistic understanding of haze formation, which is so prevalent across the country. The jury chair, Professor Arvind, as we heard, could not be with us, but he has sent a short message that I would read to you. And I quote from Dr. Arvind's message: Dr. Tripathi, my heartiest congratulations for winning this prestigious award. Please accept my apologies for not being able to present the award in person due to a last-minute medical intervention. I feel fortunate that I was able to meet you in Kanpur earlier in the week and visit your aerosol center at IIT Kanpur. I was impressed by the unique pilot scale that you have built for aerosol leak detection from nuclear plants. You have shown similar ingenuity in deploying large-scale sensor network based on air quality to assess your own, based on your own design. And of course, you have not stopped there. You have used sophisticated techniques based on modern machine learning to analyze the tremendous amount of data that you have collected. I hope increasing government and citizens' awareness of these important issues will lead to effective mitigation strategies to reduce pollution. Then we will see the beauty of Delhi and other cities again. And I unquote, that's the quote. I do think that the beauty of Delhi and other cities is also, despite pollution, is very much there. And I urge you all people to visit these cities to look at their heritage value. The jury chair, the Professor Arvind and other members of the jury, Professor Kaushik Bhattacharya from Caltech, Dr. Dhananjay Dendikuri of Achira Labs, Professor Jayati Murthy of Oregon State University, and Professor Sunita Sarvagi of IIT Bombay did a very extensive and deep dive on all the nominations, including consulting a large number of experts globally on the promising candidates to obtain a 360-degree view of their contributions and impacts. We noted that defining excellence in engineering requires a multidimensional, holistic perspective. It consists of defining problems of socio-economic relevance, bringing multidisciplinary connects and approaches for their solutions, doing both basic and translational research, and finally, implementing the solutions, products, and processes at some significant scale for impact. An attractive aspect of Professor Sachidanand's work is indeed a tight integration of these basic insights to solutions, to translation, to implementation. Professor Tripathi and his co-workers have produced fundamental and useful insights on the formation, growth, and deposition of airborne micron-scale particles called aerosols. Clearly, strategies for mitigating air pollution, as well as effective policies, regulations, and governance require quantification and analysis of the causes and sources of pollution. Professor Tripathi, for the first time, designed and deployed a vast and relatively inexpensive sensor network in some 1,400 locations in several states to collect and transmit data for analysis by a variety of machine learning and other tools. This approach has allowed resolution of several important questions on the formation of optimal sensor networks, automatic fault diagnosis, and calibration and modeling and simulation of pollution to figure out effective air quality management approaches. The vast amount of data together with machine learning has allowed development of air quality forecasting systems and understanding of several India-centric issues, such as differences in the rural and urban air quality, formation and growth of aerosol particles in India, which is even in the night without photocatalysis, which is different than the aerosol behavior elsewhere, for example, in Beijing. Professor Sachidanand's work on the collection and analysis of large-scale measurements of air quality will continue to have significant impacts on the scientific understanding and mitigation of particulate air pollution. We wish him and his group all the success going forward for the sake of all of us, for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And before I call our winner up on the stage, here is a video of Professor Tripathi talking about his mission to make a difference with his science. May we have the video, please?
I wanted to do something for the environment, and that inspired me to study air quality and air pollution. I focused mainly on studying aerosols, as it was central to understanding air quality. Air pollution is a major hazard in India and around the world, and it is important we solve it right now. We need to make policies effective, bring science into them, and devise new metrics that can be monitored at scale. Mitigation measures should move from lab to pilot and finally should be scaled up. I believe that what we are doing should be shared with the common people for their understanding.
The anchor trustee for this award category to join us, and Professor Sharma as well. And may I request our chief guest, Professor Schmidt, to present the Infosys Prize in Engineering and Computer Science to Professor Sachidanand Tripathi. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Schmidt. Thank you, Mr. Butley. Thank you, Professor Sharma. Professor Tripathi. Yeah. May I request you to say a few words, please?
Good evening. I'm honored and humbled to be here tonight. Saying that this does not make my inner child happy would be a blatant lie. There are only a few occasions in life of an Indian scientist which makes them realize the impact of their work. This is definitely one of them. This work is not mine alone. It is the culmination of the efforts of large body of students, research staff, collaborators, and many more people who have helped me reach here. I'm grateful to the Infosys Science Foundation and the members of the jury for trusting in my work. I have deepest gratitude for my eldest uncle, who went at length to teach me mathematics as a kid. My mother, who took all measures for my uninterrupted studies and hard work. This is a tribute to both of them. My father could not travel today. I thank him for giving me strength and to follow my dreams. I thank my wife for taking care of both our parents and filling the gaps wherever needed. My son for always lifting my spirits, and my in-laws for their blessings and support. I am thankful, of course, to IIT Kanpur for providing support and freedom to pursue my goals. Last, and certainly not the least, I thank God Almighty for elevating my despair in the worst of times and acting as a beacon of light to guide me to my best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, and congratulations once again. The explorer Robert Swan said, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." I hope the professor's work will inspire all of us to be a part of the solution and not the pollution. The Infosys Prize consists of a gold medal, a citation, and a purse of $100,000 in each category. The winners are selected by juries consisting of leading researchers from around the world, represented here by the jury chairs. If you watched last year's movie Oppenheimer, you would appreciate the work of our next laureate in the category of humanities. She is the founding director of our own city's brand new science gallery, and she has made it her mission to connect the dots of history to the progress of science. To tell you more, I'm very pleased to introduce to you the jury chair for humanities, Professor Akhil Bilgrami. He is the Sidney Morgan Professor of Philosophy and the Professor for the Committee on Global Thought at Columbia University. He is the author of several books and has been the chair of the Philosophy Department of Columbia from 1994 to 1998, the director of the Heyman Center of the Humanities, and the director of the South Asian Institute. He was elected Cullman Fellow at the New York Public Library, held the Ramakrishna Chair in India, and has been the recipient of fellowships and grants from the Mellon Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the National Endowment of the Humanities, as well as the Lush Foundation. Please welcome the very distinguished Professor Akhil Bilgrami.
The Infosys Prize 2023 in Humanities is awarded to the historian of science, Jahnavi Palke, for her superb scholarly study of the practice of Indian nuclear science, in which she brings to bear her peerless knowledge of the relevant archives to reveal the entire material context within which individual scientific talent and institutions of research made their theoretical and technological advances. What sometimes gets lost when we are dazzled by the power and illumination of the laws and theoretical explanations in the natural sciences is the extent to which they are the outcome of a practice. Though, of course, it's a cognitive practice, qua practice, it is, as intellectual historians from Thomas Kuhn to Peter Gallison have reminded us, lodged in a complex structure consisting of an instrumentarium and of state and academic research institutions that both facilitate and constrain that practice of inquiry, to say nothing of personal relations characterized both by cooperation as well as by territorial rivalries. All of this complex structure is brilliantly revealed in Falke's key work, The Atomic State, as it surfaces in the centers of nuclear scientific practice in Bangalore, Calcutta, and Bombay, as those cities were then called, which he then ambitiously relates to the global sites in Europe and America, to which all of atomic science can be genealogically traced, thereby giving us a hitherto missing history of the networks by which a decolonized nation, through its atomic project, with all the risks and dangers that the exercise of such national pride takes on, to assert its national sovereignty in a global family of nations. One sign of the richness of a text is that it raises for the reader subtle and difficult questions whose answers may only be hidden and unspoken in the text itself. In paying tribute to its author, I can do no better than to raise, on such a suitably public occasion such as this, one such question that it has raised for me. I have said, following Jahnavi, that after decolonization, atomic science in India and the device of destruction which it fatefully produced was motivated by a very particular form of assertion of its national sovereignty. But we can't forget that at Bandung, which Jahnavi mentions in passing in her book, India participated jointly with other newly independent nations to articulate a somewhat different vision of national sovereignty, one that, at least prima facie, might even seem to be quite at odds with such a project and its motivation. Jahnavi is, as she hinted yesterday in a lecture, too scrupulous an historian to be distracted by the temptation to make a normative assessment of India's atomic program by the lights of India's own commitment to the Bandung ideals. But since her historical subject is the practice of science, that still leaves a subtle question for us to ponder about whether and to what extent the practitioners of atomic science in India, both the famous ones and the more anonymous ones, all of which she traverses, who knew full well of their nation's commitment to the ideals of Bandung, were stricken by qualm or were inhibited in their inquiring zeal in the pursuit of that program. I just mentioned this as one among the many fascinating questions that anyone who reads this book will find themselves confronted with. A book I urge you to read because it greatly deepens our understanding of the Indian modernity which we inhabit. Falke's future project is to bring her remarkable sensibility for archival work to the study of the methods and institutions and individual talent through which the subject of statistics took form in India with an initial focus on the Indian Statistical Institute and Mahal Nobis, but I don't doubt boldly extending that canvas, as she did in her previous work, to a national and global reach. I and my colleagues in the jury, Prachi Deshpande, David Schulman, and Partha Mitter, have full confidence in our expectation that the Infosys Prize for the Humanities that she's awarded this evening will boost her morale and her resolve to achieve new heights of scholarship in this important and yet relatively unmined field she's chosen to investigate, and we eagerly look forward to its results. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And here's a short video of Dr. Janvi Phalke sharing her thoughts on how history shapes perspectives.
C.V. Raman, the Physics Nobel Laureate, conducted his experiments in a public laboratory of the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science. That's sort of the motivation that I have in mind. My areas of work have largely been history of science and technology during the long 20th century. I wanted to write history beyond ambitions, motives, actions, and accomplishments of individuals or institutions, but to see how they operate between different registers. History gives you the perspective of where you are in that long timeline of things marching in a completely chaotic manner, because nothing's linear. My vision is to create a space where someone who's passionate about an idea has the resources and the mentorship to be able to take it to another level.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on stage Dr. Janvi Phalke. May I request Mr. Narayanamurthy, the anchor trustee for this category, and Professor Bilgrami to join us for the presentation. And I request Professor Schmidt to present the Infosys Prize 2023 in Humanities to Dr. Janvi Phalke. Thank you, Professor Schmidt. Thank you, Professor Bilgrami. Dr. Phalke, may I request you to please say a few words.
Thank you. I'm absolutely delighted and I'm honored. Thank you very much to the Infosys Science Foundation for instituting an award that respects the human, social, natural, and engineering sciences as if they all mattered, because they do. And in India, as we all know, this is unprecedented. Thank you to the incredible jury, all colleagues whose work, but even more whose commitment to the world outside of academia, that I've always respected. Kavita Singh, you're missed today, and David Schulman, I wish you could travel to be with us this evening. Miraculously, there are people in this world who have cared about me and care for me. My father, who dreamt bigger for me than I ever could have. My mother, whose feet are firmly planted on the ground. My sisters, who always keep it real. And Roland, who reads everything I write, I don't know why, and remains the best human being I will have ever met. I have moved disciplines, careers, and countries when ideas, institutions, but especially colleagues, have appeared compelling. And I did so because, in the words of a very dear friend, there are things you can do, and there are things that need to be done. It is my hope to do justice to some of the things that need doing, and with the stubbornness that I possess in abundance, I hope to find fun and lightness along the way. Thank you.
Congratulations, Doctor. You clearly have a fan following out here. From nuclear science, we move now to the nucleus of our cells. Our next laureate in the category of life sciences is researching the protein molecules that move information within and between our cells, with a critical application in medicine. He's a professor at IIT Kanpur. To announce the Infosys Prize in Life Sciences, I'm very pleased to introduce the jury chair for this category, Professor Mruganka Sur. Dr. Sur is the Newton Professor of Neuroscience, the Director of the Simon Center for the Social Brain, and an investigator at the Pickover Institute for Learning and Memory at MIT. Prior to founding the Simon Center, he was the head of the MIT Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences for 15 years. He's an elected fellow of the Royal Society of the UK, the US National Academy of Medicine, the American Academy of the Arts and Science, and the Indian National Science Academy. Please put your hands together for Professor Mruganka Sur.
The Infosys Prize 2023 in Life Sciences is awarded to Professor Arun Kumar Shukla for his outstanding contributions to the biology of G-protein coupled receptors, or GPCRs, a key component of cell function. Professor Shukla's studies have elegantly illustrated mechanisms that selectively activate signaling pathways downstream of GPCRs. These and other discoveries provide fundamental understanding of the function of GPCRs and suggest a new framework for the design of novel therapeutics or drugs. Let me explain briefly what some of these words mean. The jury, Professor Vijayaraghavan, Anjana Rao, Gagandeep Kang, Scott Edwards, and Jane Langdale, unanimously picked Professor Shukla for his extraordinary creativity and productivity in elucidating what is now realized as one of the most fundamental components of mammalian cells. A cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. Our bodies have trillions of cells, by some estimate 30 trillion cells, 80 billion of which live in the brain, which I study. So these cells make up every organ in our body. And each cell consists of a cytoplasm or stuff encased within a membrane, and this cytoplasm contains molecules such as DNA and RNA and proteins, all of which you must have heard about, as well as nutrients and metabolites. In fact, the word cell comes from the Latin cellula, meaning a small room. Now, the study of cells is fundamental to biology. Cells communicate and receive information from outside, from other cells, or from the external milieu in which they live via receptors. And one of the very important kind of receptors is the G-protein coupled receptor, which Professor Shukla is an expert in. GPCRs are a key mechanism by which cells recognize a wide variety of signals from the environment, from photons to ions to neurotransmitters to hormones. Let me give you two brief examples of why this is so crucial for life. The reason you are able to see me and the slide and everybody else in this room is because photons are being absorbed in your eye by the GPCR rhodopsin in the retinal photoreceptor cells. And this absorption of photons by rhodopsin activates a transduction called a G-protein transduction cascade, which generates electrical responses to light. And this is the first step in vision. And this electrical response is then transmitted to the brain, and about half of our brain is devoted directly or indirectly to creating vision. But the first step starts with a G protein coupled receptor in the rod cells of our retina. Second, adrenaline produced during stress activates a kind of G protein receptor. I think some of our prize winners are undergoing a little bit of stress. And that's because, and that releases adrenaline, which makes their heart beat faster, or it dilates their pupils, or it constricts the blood vessels, it raises their blood pressure. And that happens because a kind of G protein coupled receptor in the cells that line the blood vessels and in the heart are being activated. And one way to reduce blood pressure, and because I have so many gray hairs and I see so many of you with gray hairs, I guarantee you a great many of you are taking beta-adrenergic receptor blockers or beta blockers, and that's one of the most important ways to reduce blood pressure. So Professor Shukla's group has revealed fundamental new mechanisms of the structural biology and biophysical properties by which G protein coupled receptors link to downstream processes. And he has shown how signaling via G protein coupled receptors can be engineered to achieve specific desired consequences and eliminate undesirable consequences. About 40% of the drugs that we use, that human beings use for a variety of conditions, including heart disease or neurological disorders, target G protein coupled receptors. Most of these drugs exhibit side effects, which limits their clinical utility. And this side effect often arises from one of the two major pathways downstream of these receptors. Professor Shukla has remarkably provided insights into how selectively engaging one pathway through distinct conformations of signaling may help minimize the side effects of commonly prescribed medicines. In addition to his scientific research, Professor Shukla has shown leadership in expanding life sciences research in India, especially on studying structures of membrane proteins, which are critical constituents of cells, using a technology called cryo-electron microscopy. His advocacy has been instrumental in obtaining support for this important area of fundamental biology. And I hope I've convinced you that fundamental biology is at the heart of translation and therapeutics, that condition. So for all these reasons and more, the jury for the Life Sciences Prize is delighted to unanimously select Professor Arun Kumar Shukla for the Life Sciences 2023 Prize.
Thank you, Professor. And here is a video of Professor Shukla sharing his passion for research and its application. May we have the video, please?
Every day when I wake up, I want to get to the lab as soon as possible. And when I'm not in the lab, I'm still thinking about our research and experiments. Doing research is a passion. We are researching on protein receptors and figuring out how do they work. It is a complex system. We would like to understand these receptors in detail to design molecules and make the existing drugs better, so that we can have a new class of therapeutic molecules for specific disease conditions. If we are able to do research in a way that can really help someone with a specific disease, I will consider that all of this effort was worth it.
Please join me in welcoming on stage Professor Arun Kumar Shukla. May I request Mr. S.D. Shibulal, the anchor trustee for this category, to join us, and Professor Sur to join the presentation. And may I request Professor Schmidt to present the Infosys Prize in Life Sciences 2023 to Professor Arun Kumar Shukla. Thank you, Professor Schmidt. Thank you, Mr. Shubilal. Thank you, Professor Sur. Professor Shukla, would you like to say a few words, please?
Thank you very much. It's a distinct pleasure and a true honor to accept this award on behalf of my lab. In fact, it's a recognition of all the passion and hard work of the students and fellows that they have put in over the years. So students and fellows, if you're watching, this belongs to you all. It is also a recognition of this particular line of research that we have been able to establish in the country, focused on membrane protein structural biology, GPCRs in particular. It's an amazing feeling to see this being recognized, and it feels so great to be able to establish Bharat at the world stage in this particular area and to inspire the next generation to take on cutting-edge research questions in this particular field. It is also a recognition and a reflection of conducive and supportive environment provided by IIT Kanpur. I have been at IIT Kanpur for a decade now, and if I had to start it all over again, I would choose IIT Kanpur in a heartbeat. Finally, I'm standing here because of unconditional love and support provided by my family, my parents, my elder brother, my sisters, my wife Prachi, and my children Arunyam and Arunya. I dedicate this award to my daughter, Arunya. She is 2.5 years now. Hopefully one day when she grows up, she understands what it means and appreciates. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shukla, and thank you, Professor Sur, for that very quick masterclass in cellular biology. Next up is mathematics, the queen of the sciences. And I paraphrase the novelist Mark Haddon, who said that prime numbers is what is left when you have taken all the patterns away. It's like life, appearing logical but very difficult to work out the rules. Our laureate for mathematics this year is searching for patterns in spaces that others don't see. He is the Fernholz Joint Professor at the Institute of Advanced Study and Princeton University since 2022. But to tell you more about his work, let me introduce you to the jury chair for mathematics, Professor Chandrasekhar Kare. He's the professor and David Saxon Presidential Term Chair in Mathematics at the University of California in Los Angeles. He's a number theorist, and his work with Jean-Pierre Wintenberger proved Serre's celebrated modularity conjecture. He has received a number of honors and awards in recognition of his work, including the Humboldt Research Award in 2011, the Cole Prize in 2011, and the Infosys Prize in 2010. In 2012, Professor Kare was elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society. Please put your hands together for Professor Chandrasekhar Kare.
Thank you, Deepak. So it gives me great pleasure to announce Professor Bhargav Bhatt from the Institute for Advanced Study, Princeton, as the winner in this category. He is recognized for his outstanding contributions to arithmetic geometry and commutative algebra. So mathematics is famously esoteric and hermetic. So I'm just going to try and give you an idea of the work of the world in which Bhargav's work is, rather than exactly what he does. So So what I'm going to try and do here is going to give you a brief history of the evolution of numbers from the usual numbers 1, 2, 3, ... to the p-adic numbers, which is what Bhargav Bhatt works in. So Kronecker said, the famous German mathematician Kronecker in the 19th century said, God made the integers and the rest is the work of man. So in the beginning were the whole numbers and integers and their ratios. These were regarded as perfect and wholesome and rational. The Pythagorean sect or school of mathematics at ancient Greece made rational numbers the basis of their worldview, from music to the stars. Pythagoreans were traumatized by the discovery that there were numbers that were not rational. The hypotenuse of a right-angled triangle with sides equal to 1 has length the square root of 2, which much to their horror they discovered is not rational. This shook their beliefs to the core and led to the collapse of the cult. Numbers like square root of 2 are called irrational. The name itself now suggests that irrational numbers were regarded as sinister and dangerous. So in the 19th century, George Cantor showed in a precise sense that there were many more irrational numbers than there were rational numbers. This accords with our intuition that there is more irrationality in the world than rationality. The deep-seated rational and irrational drives in us are perhaps rooted in the hippocampus, which is artistically shown in the cover of the Infosys Prize brochure. Now I've dropped this, so here is the brochure, yeah? And this is the picture of the hippocampus. All right, so after the Pythagoreans, irrational numbers were accepted. Mathematicians kind of come to terms with reality in the end, and the rationals were completed by adding all the irrationals in to give us the standard smooth picture of the real number line. Kronecker, the person I started quoting, regarded the real numbers as a creation of the devil, in fact. He said God created the integers and he didn't like the real numbers too much. Okay, so now to continue with the evolution of numbers, let's come to the 19th century. At the end of the 19th century, and this gets us closer to Bhargav's work, at the end of the 19th century, number theorists like Hensel realized that there were completions of the rational numbers besides the real numbers. For each prime p, as Deepak has alluded to, for number theorists, prime numbers are very beloved objects or numbers. For each prime p, there is a p-adic completion which gives rise to the p-adic numbers. These arise from looking at integers purely from the point of view of the prime number p. The completion giving the real numbers is the completion at what number theorists poetically call the prime at infinity. So the strangeness of the p-adic world is captured with this humorous quote. In fact, it's from a book by my advisor. So the quote goes, let us fix one prime number, right? Let's say 5. Suppose you live in a country under a very crazy dictator who decrees that 2 points are near if the distance between them measured by meters is divisible by a very high power of 5. So if you sit 5 cubed, right, which I've written down, I can't do this in my head, okay? if you sit 5 cubed, which is equal to 125 meters away from a friend, you're near to him. If you sit at 5 to the 5, which is 3,125 meters away, then you're very close to him, and so on. So kind of this defies our usual notion of distance. This type of topology, or metric, or distance, called the 5-adic topology, was created by the German mathematician Kummer and his student Hensel at the end of the 19th century. Naturally, the world with this topology is very different from our own, but number theorists free from any worldly restrictions can look at these such strange places. Right, so this is the end of quote from this, from my advisor. All right. So Kronecker, unlike his horror about real numbers, would regard p-adic numbers more favorably than the real numbers, as they are more constructive. So now, number theorists think that if we ignore the p-adic numbers, we lose many vital aspects of the world that number theorists seek to understand. It is hardest to understand questions over the simplest of all objects, which are just the usual integers, like 1, 2, 3. Like Fermat's last theorem, it is a question about integers. And much easier, in fact, to understand these questions over the p-adics. Once one understands the p-adic question, which is a local question, this is the jargon of number theorists, for all primes p, one can then turn around and often understand the global questions over the integers. This is called the local to global principle in number theory. This local to global strategy used in number theory is similar in spirit to the slogan of environmentalists that we hear, to think globally and act locally. The urgent questions to tackle are of a global nature, but one can only hope to make incremental progress by actions that directly impact our neighborhood. Right, so the number theory, their version of this is that they first think about the question over the p-adic numbers and then try and solve it over the integers. So Bhargav Bhatt has done profound and fundamental work in the fractal and exotic world of p-adic geometry. His work has produced some of the most exciting and impactful mathematics done anywhere in the world over the last decades. Congratulations, Bhargav.
Thank you, Professor Khare. And here is Professor Bhatt talking about visualizing problems in mathematics. Can we have the video, please?
I work in an area of math called algebraic geometry. The human mind has some fundamental limitations when it comes to visualizing in dimensions bigger than 3. But it's easier to think about algebra in any number of variables. Sometimes the geometric side is easier to work with because you can just see some qualitative features by looking at the shape. And then that will actually tell you something about the defining equations. There's a lot of different things you can do in math, and there's in fact an infinite number of possibilities. The hardest part is to come up with the right things to talk about, the right definitions. Once you come up with the right definitions, a lot of problems will just naturally solve themselves without too much effort.
Professor Bhargav Bhatt was unable to join us in Bangalore tonight, but we are so glad to have his proud parents, Drs. Deepika and Dr. Bharat Bhatt, to accept the award on his behalf. Please join me in welcoming them on the stage. I request Mr. K. Dinesh, the anchor trustee for this category, to join Professor Khare for the presentation. And may I request Professor Schmidt to present the Infosys Prize 2023 in Mathematics to Dr. Bhargav Bhatt. Thank you, Dr. Deepika Bhatt. Thank you, Dr. Bharat Bhatt. Thank you, Professor Schmidt. And we have a short video from Professor Bhatt sharing his thoughts on receiving this award. May we roll the video, please.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and it's a great honor for me to receive this prize. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank a few people that have made this possible. First and foremost is my parents. And actually my entire extended family in India. When I was growing up, they prioritized my education and they inculcated the right values. I would be nowhere without them today, so thank you. Secondly, I'd like to thank my wife. She's also a mathematician, she's my best friend, she's taught me many things, and she's been the secret to all of my success over the last decade. So thank you, Wei. Now, any prize tends to glorify the individual, but the truth is that science these days is highly collaborative. In particular, part of the work that was being recognized by this prize was conducted jointly with Matthew Morrow and Peter Schulze, and it builds on the work of a lot of mathematicians that came before us in the last 50 years. So a special thank you to all of these people. I'd also like to thank the jury for the prize. I'm fully aware that these decisions can be impossible with many deserving candidates, and I feel very lucky to be selected. So thank you. Finally, I'd like us all to thank the Infosys Science Foundation for setting up these prizes. When I was growing up in Bombay and spending most of my time playing cricket, I had no idea that there were basic questions about the universe that were unanswered, or that one could make a living answering these questions. I'm hopeful that the spotlight shown by these prizes can help tap some of India's vast talent into helping humanity solve some of its most fundamental problems. So thank you, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Our congratulations to Professor Bhatt for making such a significant mark in the prime of his research career. Well, this year's winner in the physical sciences category is a biological physicist. He's professor at the National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS, in our very own Bangalore. And he has a PhD from MIT. He is nurturing a new generation of computational biologists in India. And to announce the prize, it is my pleasure to introduce the jury chair, Professor Srinivas Kulkarni. Professor Kulkarni is the George Ellery Hale Professor of Astronomy and Planetary Science at the California Institute of Technology. He's the former director of the Caltech Optical Observatories. His primary interests are the study of neutron stars, gamma ray bursts, and the interstellar medium. His notable awards include the Alan T. Waterman Prize of the U.S. National Science Foundation, the Helen B. Warner Award of the American Astronomical Society, and the Jansky Prize of Associated Universities. Professor Kulkarni is a Fellow of the Royal Society of London, a member of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States, a Fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences, and a foreign member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences. In 2017, he won the prestigious Dan David Prize for his contribution to the emerging field of time domain astronomy. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Professor Srinivas Kulkarni.
The Infosys Prize 2023 in Physical Sciences is awarded to Professor Mukund Thattai. Looks like Mukund has a bigger fan base. He's a professor at NCBS in this city. In recognition of his groundbreaking contribution to evolutionary cell biology, he has explored the origin of endomembrane organelles, shedding new light on how they emerged from ancient primordial cells. Now, some of you may start getting confused whether this prize should be in physics at all. So first, I'd like to thank Professor Sur for introducing cells, because that's what we'll talk a bit. And in order to give the context of this prize, I need to give a rather significant long background. Molecular biology is a major field of biology. The high point of the field was the determination of the structure of the DNA, which laid the foundation for genetic coding. Incidentally, the foundations of molecular biology were physicists. As a result, we now have a parts list for biomolecules. We now routinely synthesize, edit, and produce these biomolecules. The next frontier at this point lies in understanding how cells work, and that is the topic of Dr. Thattai's research. Another frontier area is neurobiology, which Professor Sur already alluded to. Progress in these disciplines has led to a new area of physics, which I introduced to all of you, biological physics. This field joins the traditional areas of physics: astrophysics, cosmology, atomic, molecular, and optical physics, sometimes called as AMO, condensed matter physics, plasma physics, nuclear physics, and of course, particle physics. So when I was a teenager and I got interested in astronomy, there's always this question: did you want to do astronomy or astrophysics? That question is no longer asked today. The reason is, when a subject is in its formative stage, when you're trying to study the patterns, you may call it, more jokingly as butterfly collection, but that's a very important start of a subject. So traditional astronomy was, you start by counting the stars, then you start by doing motions of stars, then spectra of stars. But when you get physics into a subject is when you take all this vast observations and patterns and condense them into few rules, and that is physics. Okay, physics is about reducing large amount of observations into the smallest possible rules. Okay, that's why I think, and I'm sure all of you would agree, physics is the king of science. aided by an absolutely great queen, which I'm very fond of. In fact, recently, the US National Research Council undertook a decadal study, as it has been routinely doing for traditional areas of physics that are just listed. The decadal study was done for this new emerged field of biological physics. In fact, if you are interested in this really fascinating development, the NRC has a report. It's available for free on the web. It's called The Physics of Life. Mathematics absolutely lies at the core of physics. It was Galileo who first said, the book of physics is written in mathematics. And there have been many famous, there's been a tremendous amount of, let's say, anxiety as well as understanding why mathematics has got such a powerful sway on physics. But the point, and this is well known from a lecture that Pauli gave in the 50s. However, I would like to make some small correction to Galileo's statement that considering the developments of computer science, which is a somewhat very different sort of math, actually, no relation to prime numbers at all, I would say the book of physics is written in mathematics and computer science. Our winner's work lies at the intersection of biology, physics, and computer science. So I hope you now are slowly getting the idea why cells have come up in another context. I should also say, with biological physics as a new branch of physics, I really had to congratulate our biology friends. You have now been upgraded. Okay, now with the background done, let me get to the topic of today's winner. The first job of a cell is to reproduce. That is, it has to make a copy of itself. Amazingly, a cell can make copies of itself with just a handful number of errors along the millions or even billions of bases of DNA sequence that defines its identity. In some species, it just takes just a day for a single cell to develop into a multicellular organism that crawls away from its discarded eggshell. Perhaps you're not so impressed. After all, computers have almost negligible error rates. However, computers use transistors that operate in two states, separated, for the kind of technology we have now, between 3 and 5 volts. The noise floor is more than 1,000 times below this, which is why the error rate can be suppressed tremendously. In contrast, cells, when a cell starts replicating itself, it's in the soup of other more simpler chemicals. And the fluctuations of energy at any point, even in this room, is about 30 millielectron volts for about 300 Kelvin. The available energy that's there for this when the cells bind is only 3 times that, 2 times that. So the signal to noise ratio in this by a computer science standard is nothing, it's just 2 or 3. Despite this, the cell can go and make something amazing with a very small error. And in order to understand this, this is not the usual mathematics that goes into physics like differential equations. This is really information theory and how you come up with error-correcting codes. It is this amazing phenomena that drew Dr. Thattai, who was originally trained as a physicist, into life sciences. The first cells that appeared on Earth were primitive cells called prokaryotes. They lacked nuclei. The cells which are in a complex organism like us are the second generation cells called eukaryotes. Those rose about 2 billion years ago and gradually developed as they so there has been a change in the eukaryotes over the last 2 billion years. The eukaryotes laid the foundation of complex multicellular organisms. Dr. Thattai pioneered the application of tools from physics and computer science to study how molecular interactions generate transport networks that move material around the eukaryote cells. By combining biophysical models with genome sequence information, Dr. Thattai could go back in time, reconstruct, and understand how these transport mechanisms developed in the earliest eukaryotes. I have to say, now let me say a bit about our panel. Professor Shankar from Yale, Chandrasekhar Shivari from CSIR in India, Spenta Wadia from ICTS here in this city, Professor Yamuna Krishnan from Chicago, had to read a large amount of material to determine this prize. The reason is the physical sciences traditionally, until today, covered physics, chemistry, geology, space science, astronomy, and paleontology. I would say that, and I've been the chair for this physical sciences for 15 years now, since inception. We have recognized all areas except geology and paleontology. And if you know a very good geologist or paleontologist, please ask them to nominate, because our panel likes nothing more than finding the very best in this vast range of things to award. I end by noting that a true physical understanding, that is, once you really can understand a cell as a physical object, will in the future allow scientists to make artificial cells, which is Dr. Thattai's future dream. I'd like to end by congratulating Dr. Thattai for undertaking this trifecta interdisciplinary research, which is providing a quantitative foundation for the new field of biological physics. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kulkarni. And here is Professor Thattai talking about how curiosity is key to his approach to research. Can we have the video, please?
It's a privilege to be able to do curiosity-driven research. Science is not just about applications. It can also help answer fundamental questions about who we are and where we came from. My work combines physics and phylogenetics to retrace how complex cells evolved over billions of years. On some days, we're solving fun puzzles. On others, we're grappling with really hard problems. Nothing makes sense. One of the best parts of being a scientist is meeting interesting people from different areas, seeing things from their point of view. There's always a lot to learn.
Please join me in welcoming on stage Professor Mukund Thattai. May I request Mr. Nandan Nilekani, the anchor trustee for this category, to join us, and Professor Kulkarni to join the presentation. Professor Schmidt, would you please present the Infosys Prize 2023 in Physical Sciences to Professor Mukund Thattai. Thank you, Professor Schmidt. Thank you, Professor Kulkarni. Thank you, Mr. Nilekani. Professor Thattai, a few words, please.
I'm deeply honored to receive this award. I especially want to thank the Physical Sciences jury for this recognition. As you heard, they have articulated a vision of 21st century physics as a vibrant and diverse enterprise, with the physics of life as an integral part. My scientific journey has been an extraordinarily fortunate one. My teachers, some of whom are in the audience here, encouraged my curiosity. My mentors showed me that disciplinary boundaries were porous, And my institution, NCBS, took the risk of hiring a physicist who knew almost nothing about biology. And I've had the chance to work with some extraordinary students there. I have learned a lot of biology since then. I want to thank my parents for giving me the space to make my own choices. My wife, Nidhi, for keeping me grounded and being an equal partner through every challenge. And my children, Kadambri and Raghav, for continually surprising me. And finally, I want to remember my grandmother, Padma Narasimhan. She had somehow known that I was going to be a scientist long before I did. And she would have been very happy to see me on this stage today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. This year's winner for social sciences is a prolific researcher and author. She's a professor of political science at Columbia University and received her PhD from Harvard. To tell you more about our winner's writings and to announce the award for social sciences, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Professor Kaushik Basu. He's Professor of Economics and the C. Marks Professor of International Studies at Cornell University. He's the former Chief Economist of the World Bank and was the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. A Fellow of the Econometric Society, he has published widely in the areas of development economics, industrial organization, game theory, and welfare economics. In May 2008, he was awarded the Padma Bhushan by the Government of India. Please put your hands together for Professor Kaushik Basu.
The Infosys Prize 2023 in Social Sciences is awarded to Professor Karuna Mantena, Professor of Political Science at Columbia University in New York, for her groundbreaking research on the theory of imperial rule and the claim that this late imperial ideology became one of the important factors in the emergence of modern social theory. Her book and related papers are landmark publications in political theory with implications for all the social sciences. Let me turn to slightly more informal matters. Her book, Alibis of Empire, I just referred to that, published by Princeton University Press in 2010, is a masterly work that helps us understand that the dramatic shift in British imperial policy that followed the 1857 rebellion in India, the famous rebellion in India, was not just a reaction to this traumatic event, but was legitimated by a new ideology of indirect imperial rule that was carefully crafted and curated by the ingenious conceptual work of several thinker administrators such as Henry Maine. For Maine, the goal of imperial rule must be to preserve customary forms of legal and social practice. The public and political sphere, on the other hand, must remain in the hands of imperial powers. By making this change from direct to indirect rule, the empire found a perfect alibi to perpetuate itself. The natives were not capable of self-government, or what Gandhiji called Swaraj. Several of her papers constitute major contributions to political theory. For instance, Another Realism, The Politics of Gandhian Nonviolence, published in American Political Science Review, provides a consequentialist interpretation of nonviolence, quite an unusual take and interpretation of nonviolence. I was personally deeply impressed by a message that emerges from between the lines of the book Alibis of Empire. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Britain was home to some of the greatest Enlightenment thinkers who promoted the idea of individual liberty and fundamental human rights. How could these commitments within Britain square up with what Britain was, as an imperial power, doing in its colonies, such as India? This, in turn, raises troubling questions about the intentions of individuals and the behavior of the group consisting of these individuals. It's like some of the topics we were hearing earlier, cells and the totality, the possible contradictions. Is it possible for a group to behave in a way that contradicts the motivations of the individuals that constitute this group? This question had been raised in the context of self-interested behavior by game theorists working in the Rand Corporation in the United States and some mathematicians at Princeton University in the 1950s. I think Karuna's work raises some similar questions in the context of moral behavior and moral motivation of individuals and the group. This is a big research agenda, and I feel there should be scope for a lot of future work in this. Similarities, I'm talking of across disciplines, but similarities across fields are often hidden. Yesterday, at one of the meetings, we were talking about creativity in research and creativity in music and the arts. Kishori Amonkar trying to perfect a raga. Pablo Picasso trying to get a shade exactly right. John Nash searching for that elusive fixed point in a correspondence, spending days, weeks, months thinking of nothing else but that. These are disparate activities, but they are all united, almost like a common soul, by a common creative urge. So there is something common about these very diverse activities, research and music and art, which is to do with creativity. The jury this year was a very distinguished ones, I should mention, consisted of Rajiv Bhargav, Sonaldi Desai, who could not make it today, Gopal Gandhi, Mamta Murthy, and Andrew Wilford. All of them are here, barring Sonal. As we zeroed in on Karuna Manthana from among a highly talented group of contestants for the prize, it turned out to be a wonderful experience and journey for all of us. As we read and came to grips with Professor Manthana's creative approach to examine age-old questions concerning political power and nonviolence, and the underlying ideologies and mechanisms that shape them, I hope her research will contribute to better and more just policy making in India and in the world. Professor Manthana has received numerous honors and awards, including the Elizabeth Adesesha Award, the Balzan Skinner Fellowship, and the Gaddis Smith International Book Prize. I hope that she will cherish the addition of one more to this list, the Infosys Prize for Social Sciences. Congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Basu. And before I call her up to receive her award, here is Professor Karuna Manthana talking about questions that she's trying to answer through her work.
In politics, behind every position and every policy, there's theory at work. My initial interest was looking at the history of legal codification. the impact of British rule on Indian laws in the 19th and 20th century, and how it contributed to contemporary political conundrums. I care about how ideas are generated and how they are put into practice and how they are shaped by resistance and reaction. What holds diverse social groups together? How do they manage conflict and enact change non-violently? I think that's a question that every society has to struggle with.
Please join me in welcoming on stage Professor Karuna Manthena. May I request Mr. Mohandas Pai, the anchor trustee for this category, to join us on stage, and Professor Basu to join the presentation. Professor Schmidt, may I request you to please present the Infosys Prize in Social Sciences 2023 to Professor Karuna Manthena. Thank you, Professor Schmidt. Thank you, Professor Basu. Thank you, Mr. Pai. Professor Manthena, a few words, please.
I'd like to start by thanking the Infosys Science Foundation and this wonderful jury for this extraordinarily humbling prize. Without the love and support of my parents, Surya Narayana Raju and Anusuya, who are here today, I would never have found the freedom or courage to live in the world of ideas. Without the filial and scholarly fellowship of my sister, Rama, my brother-in-law, Sunil Agnani, and my dear best friend, no longer with us, Kavita Datla. Without them, this journey would have been less intense and certainly less pleasurable. And on the note of pleasure, I'd like to also mention my brother, Narendra, and my sister-in-law, Purnima, have time and again and so generously made their home in Hyderabad my home. I'd also, of course, like to acknowledge three very important mentors and advisors, my PhD advisors, Richard Tuck and Pratap Banu Mehta, also an Infosys awardee, and my undergraduate teacher and now dear and cherished colleague, Shudipto Kaviraj. Their non-possessiveness of ideas, their commitment and encouragement to think adventurously, and their sheer brilliance continues to inspire me. If 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, when I received my PhD, I could not have anticipated the ways in which my work has been taken up by friends, colleagues, and students in and from India. This generation is producing just wonderful work, a real renaissance in the intellectual history of India and in the political theory of India. I want to thank them for allowing me to learn, to grow, and to contribute to this invigorating conversation. And I take this event, this award, this honor to be a testament to how important and vibrant public intellectual life in India is and can be. And I take the award as a charge for me to do my best to protect and deepen it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Well, those are our 6 Infosys Prize laureates for this evening, and even as I urge you to give them another big round of applause, may I request Mr. Gopal Krishnan to accompany our chief guest to the first row, please. Thank you, Professor Schmidt. Thank you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Music is a universal means of celebration. And I invite you now to sit back and enjoy for a few minutes this specially curated performance by the Blue Trio. They're a vibrant musical collective that plays classical fusion, original and film music, and featuring Shreya Devnath on the violin, Praveen Sparsh on percussion, and Navneet Sundar on the keyboard. Please put your hands together for the Blue Trio. Stand.
Taste it. That's right. We want to taste it immediately.
Yeah.
Good evening again, and thank you for the warm introduction. We are happy to flag off our second set for the evening with Chakara Raghuji, sung very famously by Bharat Ratna Srimati M.S. Subbulakshmi. This is a song of pure, unadulterated joy, sung by Meera about her adored Krishna. We next present Atilana in the rag Mishramand, again a composition of the legendary violinist Sri Lalgudi Ji Jairam.
What a performance, setting the mood for reflection and celebration. Thank you, Blue Trio, Shreya, Navneet, and Praveen. Let's give them a big hand. And now, to formally introduce our chief guest for this evening, may I invite Mr. Narayana Murthy to the podium. Comes to you.
Well, being the oldest trustee of the Infosys Science Foundation has its own privileges. Perhaps the most important of these privileges is the honor and privilege of introducing our chief guest. Professor Brian Schmidt is a distinguished professor of astronomy at the Australian National University. For his work on the accelerating universe, Brian Schmidt, as leader of the High-Z SN research team, was awarded the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics, jointly with Adam Rees and Sol Perlmutter. Professor Schmidt has worked across many areas of astronomy, including supernovae, gamma ray bursts, gravitational wave transients, exoplanets, and metal poor stars. Professor Brian Schmidt completed joint undergraduate degrees in astronomy and in physics at the University of Arizona in 1989, an astronomy master's degree in 1992, and a PhD in 1993 from Harvard University. After a postdoctoral fellowship at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, Professor Brian Schmidt joined the staff of the Australian National University in 1995. In 2000, Professor Schmidt was awarded the Australian government's inaugural Malcolm McIntosh Award for achievement in the physical sciences. In 2006, he was jointly awarded the Shaw Prize for Astronomy and shared the 2007 Gruber Prize for Cosmology and the 2014 Breakthrough Prize in Physics with his High-Z SN research team colleagues. He served as the 12th Vice Chancellor and the President of the Australian National University from 2016 to 2023. Professor Schmidt is a Fellow of the Australian National Academy of Sciences, the United States Academy of Sciences, Royal Society of London, foreign member of the Spanish Royal Academy of Sciences, and foreign member of the Indian Academy of Sciences. He serves on several boards and councils, including Australia's National Science and, a National Science and Technology Council, and Singapore's Academic Research Council. In 2014, he was made a Companion of the Order of Australia. Professor Brian Schmidt also runs My Penroy Vineyard and Winery, a 2.7-acre vineyard and a small winery in the Canberra district, which produces Pinot Noir. Now I give you Professor Brian Schmidt.
Well, thank you, everyone. And first of all, congratulations to our absolutely outstanding winners today, recognizing the work you and your colleagues have done. Congratulations once again. And thank you to the Infosys Foundation for being prepared to back the foundational academic work occurring here in India and abroad that is changing the way we see the world and ultimately leads to the human progress that each of us wants. And I'm going to be talking about that today in the virtuous cycle of science, because I think it is very easy to forget about how the world of science works and contributes to global prosperity. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. I'm an astronomer. Astronomy is, in some sense, the most abstract and seemingly useless of the physical sciences. Yet it is the oldest physical sciences. In Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have a story. The story of the Seven Sisters. Story of 6 women and 1 woman gone rogue, stolen by another star. And they use this story to figure out how to navigate the Australian continent. But this story, of course, is a story that we see around the world. It is a story that we see in the stars, the Pleiades, a set of stars 80 million years old, right at the celestial equator. So everyone in the world who has ever existed has been able to see this set of stars. And that's why I think that's an interesting story, because everyone has seen these stars from the dawn of humanity, and we all have stories. In Greece, the Pleiades; here in India, a story. One's in Thailand. We see it in North America. We see it in almost every culture, a version of this story. And the reason is this is a story that predates modern boundaries of countries. It goes back to 65,000 years, because that is the time that the Australian Aboriginals became disconnected from the rest of the world. And yet we have that same story. It is a story that is as old as we can imagine, as old as humanity itself. And indeed, every human has shared and continues to share the stars. This is a very famous cave in Lescombe in France. It's dated very accurately to 17,300 years ago. And you can see the Pleiades next to Taurus, a bull. And why are they there? Well, because when you look in the sky, that is Taurus, the constellation, with Pleiades sitting there on its shoulder. The idea of the constellation of Taurus is 17,300 years old at least. We see it there in that cave. Astronomy has been at the progress of humanity. It has been used to understand when to plant, when to move. But we think of it, I think, most recently over the last 2,000 years of the development of technology. So Ptolemy went through and derived a very elaborate system, the Ptolemaic system, to go out and figure out how the stars and planets were related, how the planets moved across the sky. And he became very good at making predictions. Now, those predictions were based on what the Greeks called axioms, things they took to be true. And axioms are great when they are correct. And in this case, they weren't correct, and so they had to kind of fiddle with the data. But effectively, it was taken that the Earth was at the center of everything, and that everything traveled in circles. And they were able to build up effectively this complex set of epicycles that was extremely accurate at predicting where the planets would be over time. And it was so accurate, it stayed put throughout, literally for 1,500 years in place. It was superseded eventually, not actually by Copernicus. He very famously said, this would all be so much simpler if I put the sun at the center, still had everything travel as circles, and it gives you most of what Ptolemy had predicted 1,500 years ago. But it was heretical, because that axiom of the Earth not being at the center was taken away. So it wasn't really thought as being the correct idea until the basics of science started to develop. And that started with, I think more than anyone, Tycho Brahe. And Tycho was, as I think Sri Kulkarni described earlier, someone who just went out and looked at things and measured them. He built elaborate equipment that allowed us to measure very accurately how the planets moved across the sky. He didn't really know why he was doing this, as near as I could tell, but it seemed like something to do up in Sweden in the dark winters. He employed a mathematician of a sort, Kepler, when he was actually forced out of Sweden down into Prague. And Kepler was able to go through and start seeing patterns in what Tycho Brahe saw, because Tycho Brahe had measured the motion of the planets so accurately they could see the large flaws that were in the calculations done using the Ptolemaic system. He could also go through and very cleverly do triangulation on the orbit of Mars. And he soon realized that Mars moved not in a circle, but in an ellipse. Other observations came from Galileo. Galileo had sort of improvised how to use glass optics to make a telescope. And he wasn't really the inventor of the telescope, but he made it practically useful, and he used it to look at the sky. And so when he looked at Jupiter, what did he see? He saw something that looked kind of like this, a big blob that was not a star, but with 4 moons that clearly orbited Jupiter, not the Earth. Clearly the Earth was not the center of that. Heresy, yes, and it cost him dearly. When he looked at Venus, he could see that Venus went, as Copernicus would say it would, from a crescent to full, with the full Venus on the other side of the sun, and the crescent Venus being very close to the Earth, just as Copernicus would say. Galileo really started a theme that lives in science today, which is that when you put down axioms, you test them, and you see whether or not the basics of your theory is actually real. As I said, it cost him dearly. He was put into a very nice Tuscan villa, not allowed to leave it, where he became a winemaker, but probably drank more of his wine than he should for the last 20 years of his life. Newton, well, Newton was the person who really used mathematics to tie all this astronomy together. He built up the theory of gravity, and optics, and a whole bunch of other things. And from that, he could see, emerging from his theory of gravity, that planets and other things should travel on ellipses, just like Kepler realized observationally. He, through calculus, created a powerful mathematical framework where you take ideas and you rigorously test them and help build up what is the scientific method that we use today. Telescopes continued our discovery, and in 1781, using a very large but quite primitive telescope, Herschel was able to discover the first planet that had not been known since historic or prehistoric times. And he did that by just literally a brute force looking across the sky and seeing a disk, a very small, faint disk, move across the sky. This is the planet Uranus. And Uranus was interesting because as they followed it over time, it didn't follow the Newtonian orbit. That is, it seemed that there was a problem with Newtonian physics, unless there was another planet. And Laureate, a French mathematician, predicted through a very impressive set of mathematics for the time where the new planet would be to cause Uranus's track around the sun to make sense. He essentially published that idea, and Galilei in Berlin promptly went out and looked and discovered Neptune just within a year later. Leverrier also noticed that Mercury was moving not as, again, Newton's laws would predict. Its orbit was precessing, and he hypothesized there must be a planet, Vulcan, very near the sun. Now, people looked for Vulcan, and they never could find it, and this was a mystery. It was a small perturbation, but the beautiful thing of Newton's powerful framework of science is when Newton predicted something, he predicted it pretty much exactly to be right. And when you could measure something to be wrong, you knew there was a problem. Unrelated to this, but very important, Einstein was trying to understand a revelation that he had that acceleration and gravity must be indistinguishable. He had this revelation, maybe apocryphally, when he saw someone fall off the roof of a two-story building. And he thought, rather than maybe I should call an ambulance, that that person must not feel any gravity as he falls. That is, that gravity must counteract his acceleration due to falling. And he thought that must just be a foundation that is always true. So the idea is that according to Einstein, you cannot actually tell if you're being accelerated by gravity on Earth or you're in a rocket in space accelerating at the same rate as Earth's gravitational acceleration. It took him 8 years to reconcile that idea. And in the end, he predicted that space should be curved, and that when you looked, for example, at stars near the sun, the curvature of space would cause them to be displaced. He predicted something, people went out and measured it, and found that he indeed was correct. And this was the thing that really made Einstein famous to the average person, because when this eclipse expedition went out by Arthur Eddington and vindicated him, it was one of the first times, except for, I think, Copernicus, where someone went out and made a prediction based on aesthetics. They say, this is a beautiful theory, therefore it should be correct. Now, it turns out science doesn't work that way very often. It has worked with Copernicus saying, I think this is more beautiful, but no reason to make the sun at the center, except for it's more beautiful. And Einstein thinking, aesthetically, I think gravitation and acceleration must always be equivalent. Normally, we have to go out, find a problem, and fix it. Now, it turns out Einstein's theory did fix a lot, and it predicted a lot of things which we have just, even as of 10 years ago, made a discovery in the case of gravitational waves for the first time, that these things existed. So it's an incredibly powerful theory that we continue to test. So astronomy is the essence of science. It is at the center of the development of the scientific philosophy, where you come up with an idea, you predict things, you observe them, you compare, and then you either modify your theory or you say, well, we think that must be right. And the beautiful thing of this is that it actually allows you to predict things in advance with a great deal of fidelity once you have done enough work to get down to a basic physical theory that actually mimics the real thing. It's not necessarily perfect. Newtonian physics was not perfect, but it was very good. This is foundationally different than something like artificial intelligence, which interpolates on known information. But artificial intelligence, at least to this point, doesn't predict things out of the bounds of our current knowledge, where physical theory does, and it's an important distinction. So, now a little bit of a personal story. Here I am with my dad at the age of 5. I grew up in a very remote part of North America. This is Montana, where it is currently 40 below zero Fahrenheit or Celsius. And because that wasn't cold enough, I moved to Alaska. Here I am as a 15-year-old with my first telescope. The problem with the telescope in Alaska is it doesn't get dark during summer. It only is dark during the middle of winter, so I tended to use it to take pictures of animal life more than anything up in Alaska. But the beautiful thing of the way science works is I was able to go from those very remote parts of America and study, first at Arizona, then at Harvard, cosmology, and become an astronomer. And one of the things that I was taught was about the beginnings of cosmology, and Edwin Hubble going out and measuring the distances of stars based on how bright they were, and the fact that the further away the stars were, or the galaxies were, that the stars resided in, the more that their light was redshifted, was stretched. And so this was something that was used to infer that the universe was expanding. And the reason, using a cartoon, that Hubble made that claim was that if you take a universe, and here's a little cartoon universe, and I've expanded it there, and we overlay the first image with the second image, then you see that when you look at nearby objects, they haven't moved much. But when you look at distant objects, as I hope I can show you in a second, when you look at distant objects, they've moved a lot more. And so in a universe that's expanding, you see what Hubble saw. The further away something is, the more it has moved away or its light has been stretched. And so that turns out to actually naturally come out of Einstein's theory of general relativity, although it took a couple decades to realize it. So in the universe, as I learned, when I go through and I look at a distant object, its light travels through an expanding universe and it gets stretched. And the further I look away, well, I'm looking back in time because light travels at a finite speed, 300,000 kilometers per second. But if I look back far enough, I can literally look billions of years into the past. The other thing that I learned using general relativity is that if we go through and we think about the universe and do a thought experiment, if the universe is expanding, we can run it in reverse and think, well, what happens? Well, things get closer and closer in the past, and there is a time in the past where everything is on top of everything else. The Big Bang naturally comes out of that. And so if you go through and do a very simple version of what general relativity predicts, you can go through and say, if I extrapolate back in time, then there is a time of the Big Bang when everything is on top of itself. And all I have to do is go through and measure how fast the universe is expanding now. That's the slope of that line, and I can figure out the age. But general relativity tells you it's not quite that simple. The universe is actually full of stuff. And so gravity, the stuff in the universe, is actually going to slow the universe down over time. And so you actually need to understand how fast the universe is slowing down to figure out how old it is. And general relativity, remember, allows you to predict what happens in the future. And so if the universe isn't slowing down much, it just gets bigger and bigger, it goes on forever. But if the universe is heavy, it might slow down enough so that although all universes start that Big Bang to begin with, only the heavy ones, the ones that got a lot of gravity, slow down in the Big Bang backwards, also known as the Gnab-Gib in certain quarters. So, that was what I did for my PhD. Here I am with my PhD supervisor in 1993, very enthusiastically showing Bob Kirshner how fast the universe was expanding. And the number we got, well, the universe is about 14 billion years old. That turns out, I get some credit because that's about the correct answer. And it was a very contested thing that a lot of other people worked on. I can see Shri rolling his eyes and saying, "You got lucky, kid," because many, many people got that answer wrong, but at least I did get it right. So my job was to go through and to think, well, actually I want to know how old the universe really is and what the future is, and so I need to measure how much the universe is slowing over time. And so you could do another thought experiment, is you look at really, really distant objects, measure how fast the universe is expanding in the distant universe, so that's the past, billions of years, and compare it to the present, which is what I did for my PhD thesis. And in this thought experiment, if the universe was expanding faster in the past and slowed down a lot, that yellow line, then you know the universe is heavy and it's eventually going to end in the Gnab-Gib. If it's going slower than that, if it's slowing down slower than that, gravity loses and the universe lasts forever. So that was my pitch to get my first job in Australia. Now to do it, you have to go out and measure distances on the other side of the universe. A team in Chile had figured out how to measure it using exploding stars distances very accurately. So we used them and we started a big experiment. And 3 years and a bit later, we made our measurement. And here is that set of curves, except for there was a problem. When we looked at the distant objects, they weren't slowing down at all. They were above the line. The universe was actually speeding up. That is, we expected a prediction from general relativity. General relativity told us the wrong answer, seemingly. Well, it turns out general relativity is a little complicated. And so we discovered that the universe was accelerating, a big surprise for which a team, myself included, and 20 people from 5 continents were part of. Well, that was a huge surprise. That is why we won the Nobel Prize. Now, it was about being at the right place at the right time with people's work for hundreds of years, going right back to Newton. That's what allowed us to do this work. And that's the way science works. The one thing, since we have a number of young people here, in 1998, when we made this discovery, there were not a lot of women in astronomy, as you can see. Since that time, half my students, half my postdocs have been women. So if you are a young woman, take solace, it's a lot better, and we've made some practice, lots of room for astronomy for you. So our discovery is part of that evolution of how science works. Now it turns out we think that actual general relativity is right, because Einstein realized back in 1917 that if the universe is full of energy, it will naturally accelerate, as we discovered. We had no reason to believe the universe was full of energy. But even to this day, 2024, more or less the ideas behind our experiment in 1998 hold true. There are a few creeping little issues that we need to understand, but the basic story remains as it was 20 years ago. At this point, my Minister of Science and Industry, emphasis on industry, comes and says, why do I care? And this is when I have to actually talk about how science works. Because as we go out and do work in science and astronomy and astroparticle physics, the area that I work in, seemingly the most useless area of science, it ends up making a difference. So let's look at our iPhone or Android phone, and you realize that we have all sorts of things in there that depend on the astronomy I do. The GPS systems use general relativity. The Wi-Fi was actually invented by Australian astronomers working in the area of pulsar bits. The CMOS camera that we all use to post on Instagram, well, that was developed by JPL for a mission to Jupiter. And the touchscreen was invented in CERN. Indeed, if you go through and look, for example, at just the CMOS camera, it's a fairly recent invention. And this goes back to 1992, and now we have them in literally billions upon billions of devices. It's a revolution that occurred because astronomers needed it to occur to get a low-energy device to Jupiter that we could run. And this is true of almost everything that is in the iPhone. If you look at all the pieces of an iPhone, these are all the basic scientific discoveries going back in time, all the way to the Greeks and before, that have led to that. And that is, if you really want to know, just the tip of the iceberg of what goes in. Technology is complex. When the minister says to you, but why don't you just give me the iPhone and don't do all the science? The answer is the ideas come from the basic research that we are celebrating with our winners tonight. So much to do. What should we be working on? Well, I personally am going to be working on what's going on with black holes. There are many, many of them, and they're big. And we're using laser interferometers to measure one of the predictions of general relativity, that there will be gravitational waves. And a gravitational wave is emitted when, for example, two black holes, also predicted by general relativity, come together, and they create a little ripple in space where at some point, when one of these comes through you, your head gets a little bigger this way, then a little bigger this way. And if you can measure things to about 1,000th the width of the atomic nucleus, then you can actually see these. And it turns out that technology exists to that level of accuracy through the LIGO experiment, now the Virgo experiment, and other experiments, including, we hope, an experiment here in India I'll talk about just briefly. But what we're finding is throughout the universe, black holes are coming together and forming large black holes. But what's interesting is the universe is full of black holes that are 20, 30, 40, 50, even 100 times the mass of our sun. And we just don't see those. Now, it turns out they're actually quite hard to see. Black holes have the name they have for a reason. But it is, I would say, maybe a little bit of a surprise that there are so many black holes of that size. And it's telling us that perhaps black holes were created en masse in the early universe. And the first things that we're seeing from the James Webb Space Telescope perhaps are giving us hints. And some of the metal-poor stars, those are the first stars in the early universe, also suggest this. That's some other work that I have done. But we want to go out and we want to look at these things in detail and go through and understand in detail how the black holes were created back in time. So that is something I will be working on in the years to come. And India, I believe, will be working on it as well. Because LIGO India is a big project going on here and getting started, where we are able to put one of these very precise laser interferometers in India to help us measure much more accurately in the sky where these things occur, and also give us a higher ability to detect them. Now, LIGO itself, you would say, again, why would India do this? Well, it, again, is a bleeding edge technology. And ANU, my university, has been in the middle of helping create the very precise detectors over the last 20 years. And just in the last 3 years, I've had the chance last year when Prime Minister Modi visited Australia to talk about this, and he wanted to talk about LIGO India in his visit to Australia. So that's what we're talking about here. And here at ANU, we have been able to use some of the fancy quantum squeezing, where we're able to extract more information to go out and create very precise LiDAR and create spin-out technologies that are going to help everything from agriculture to defense. We have another spin-out called Liquid Instruments that uses the technology behind LIGO to create precision testing equipment that's used in the new rounds of electrical equipment in all sorts of ways. And we have another spin-out that has just come out, again, out of our very small group that works on LIGO-type things at ANU. Because that basic science creates the ideas that are then translated. So that's why India is probably going to work on LIGO, is to help create that technology and scholars who have that knowledge to go out and do everything from spin-outs to helping the existing companies go out and remain at the cutting edge. So it is an exciting time to be doing science. Things like the James Webb Space Telescope, the biology revolution that we've heard about, how we're able to go through and do precision experiments in biology and chemistry. But the science and technology we do are completely interdependent these days. One makes the other, makes the other. And so to our young students in the audience, if you love science, it's something really worthwhile doing. It's not just a gateway to the knowledge, but it's a gateway to the world of technology and startups. And so I encourage people to have the confidence to do the science like our winners tonight, because it gives you a range of options, a range of things to do no matter what we do in the years ahead. As you study to these young people, I always tell people to make sure you learn to do something that you love so you do it well, because it gives you the ability to go through and learn how to learn and learn the deep skills required to do something well. And that quality, that capability, is what you can turn into almost any problem. It's a way of thinking, it's a way of learning, and a way of doing that is incredibly powerful and underpins the technological revolution that powers humanity. And so to people I say, don't be scared to use that knowledge to whatever comes in front of you, because you will have so many options if you have that deep ability in science and technology. And this is important because the future is for humanity to make. In this picture taken about the time I was born, you can see Australia and India about a quarter of the globe apart. There are 8.1 billion humans on this earth, growing at about 70 million humans per year. And we are in a race to ensure that humanity can peacefully coexist on planet Earth while we develop the technology that underpins energy transitions, food transitions, water transitions. And that is going to be done, that knowledge is going to be done by basic science feeding into technology in that virtuous cycle. That is the future of a prosperous humanity. Thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Brian Schmidt. Thank you, Professor. What a fascinating presentation. My takeaways: how to question the assumptions of theory with observations, how knowledge is developed through the process of science, and how it impacts the things that we do every day. And now, as we draw this evening's program to a close, I request Mr. Salil Parekh, CEO and Managing Director of Infosys, and a trustee of the Science Foundation, to please deliver the closing remarks.
My God, that was incredible. I usually would find it difficult to understand any of the things which are in leading science and technology, but that was so well explained. Thank you very much for that incredible session. It's fantastic to be here with all of you. Thank you for being here. And it is so inspiring to hear the stories of all the people awarded this Infosys Prize. Each year, as I come here, when I hear the stories, the approach, the commitment, and the contribution, I really have goosebumps in what people have gone through to come at the level they have come to. This has been an incredible year for India. We've had this great honor, a thrill of putting Chandrayaan-3 and the moon. I know the whole world was watching, and it was an incredibly proud moment to be Indian in that time, where you could see everyone looking at it and saying that we've done something quite special. Congratulations to all the individuals that have won, awarded the Infosys Prize. Your work, whether it's to save the air we breathe, make life-saving medicine safer, better understand processes, simplify the complex numbers, and even start or invent a new aspect of physics, it's been incredible achievement, so congratulations for that. It's truly exceptional to have with us our chief guest, Nobel Laureate in Physics, Professor Brian Schmidt, to see the journey from Montana to Boston to Australia and all the contributions. It's incredible. And really the way you shared with us the virtuous cycle of science makes all of us, certainly me, think where we can make an impact. The government of India has been extremely far-sighted in making the prize money for the winners of Infosys Prize tax-free in India. We are enormously grateful for that, and we sincerely believe it's an excellent investment for the future of our country. Thank you to the jury chairs and the entire jury for their incredible work in identifying such Infosys Prize awardees, and for sharing in again a way that was really something most of us could follow what the work was and what it really illustrated in that field, which was quite important. Thank you to the trustees of the Infosys Science Foundation. Your vision has made this institution, this prize, a reality. In its 15th year, we see the foundation continuing to fulfill its purpose and supporting the leading research which impacts and progresses India. Infosys, the company itself, is extremely proud to support the Infosys Science Foundation in the past and as it goes ahead. Thank you to the team at the Infosys Science Foundation. It's a small but a highly impactful team, Bhavna, Swati, Pragati, and Serene. And with the help of all the Infosians who work with you. And thanks to all of you for being here. It's amazing to see that all of you have shown up for this to benefit from and to contribute to. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful evening ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Parekh. And now may I request Mr. Narayan Murthy to join us on the stage as we present a token of our appreciation to our chief guest and the jury chairs. First, I would like to call on stage Professor Brian Schmidt. Professor Ashutosh Sharma. Professor Akhil Bilgrami. Professor Mriganka Sur. Professor Chandrasekhar Khare. Professor Srinivas Kulkarni. Go to the other side. And Professor Kaushik Basu. Yes, a nice pose for an intimate photograph. Mr. Gopal Krishnan, would you like to join us on stage as well, please? Thank you. Thank you, jury chairs. May I request Mr. Gopal Krishnan, Mr. Murthy, and Professor Schmidt to stay on stage, the jury chairs. Thank you. And may I now invite all of the winners to join us for a photograph. Dr. Deepika Bhatt, please, as well. Thank you. One second. Professor, I'll just take your bag, make a nice photograph. Ladies and gentlemen, the winners of the Infosys Prize 2023. Thank you. Please. Well, with that, thank you once again to all of you for sharing this very special evening with us. Please switch on your mobile phones. Dinner is served at the Prince of Wales lawns that are adjacent to this venue. Have a very pleasant evening, and I will see you next year. Have a good evening. Thank you.